new part. Let us learn more about RK Narayanan, who is the author of A Snake in the Grass. We have the eminent personality from St.Teresa's College, Ernakulam, to speak about RK Narayanan.
Hello children. Today I'm here to introduce you to one of the most famous of Indian writers writing in English, RK Narayanan. RK Narayanan was born in 1906 and he died in 2001. His real name was Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Iyer Narayana Swami. It's a very long name. Now he was one of 8 children, 6 brothers and 2 sisters, and his youngest brother was equally famous, the very famous cartoonist RK Lakshman. Many of you would probably have seen his creation, The Common Man, which appeared regularly in the newspaper. But let's come back to our own writer. RK Narayanan was the creator of a fictional town called Malgudi. Malgudi is a small town in South India, created in the novels and the short stories of RK Narayanan. Narayan is also known as one of the big 3 of Indian writing in English. The big 3 consists of the 3 famous Indian writers, Raja Rao, Mulk Raj Anand and RK Narayanan. Just to give you an idea about the difference between these 3 writers, Raja Rao wrote on very philosophical issues, things like identity, spirituality, the sense of self, such philosophical ideas. Mulk Raj Anand was a very socially committed writer. He spoke about the problems of untouchability, of labor, of social inequality, of exploitation, subjects like that. Narayan, on the other hand, wrote about a small town in South India and the lives of the inhabitants of that town called Malgudi, their day-to-day existence, their relationships, etc. It is almost like a storyteller narrating a story in the evening, where a grandmother sits in the middle and she has her grandchildren around her and she simply tells you a story. Narayan was born in Madras, which is now known as Chennai in Tamil Nadu. His father was a school headmaster and Narayan did some of his studies in his father's school. Now his father's job had frequent transfers, so Narayan spent a part of his childhood in the care of his maternal grandmother Parvati. In his autobiography, My Days, he describes his life with her, how she used to teach him maths, arithmetic, mythology, classical Indian music, Sanskrit, etc. He also talks about the various pets that he had: peacocks, a monkey, a kitten, a myna, a parrot, a puppy, etc. Now, in his autobiography, My Days, he describes much of the highs and the lows and the various events that take place in his life. And I thought that rather than show you pictures of the book, I will show you the books themselves. So here you have his autobiography, My Days. In this autobiography, he talks about how he studies in a number of schools, like the Lutheran Mission School, the Christian College High School, how he studies in the school where his father was the principal in Mysore. He goes on to describe how he fails his university entrance exam. After his high school, they had the university entrance exam and he had expected that, he might fail in physics or chemistry. He says these 2 subjects defied my understanding. I couldn't understand these 2 subjects. But unexpectedly, he passed those 2 subjects. He failed in the subject that he was most confident in, that is English. The reason I'm telling you about this incident is that we should not take failure so much to heart. This is the person who failed his university exam in English. He goes on to be a writer of international renown for writing novels and stories in English. Even today, when we talk about Indian writing in English, along with Mulkraj Anand and Raja Rao, stalwarts like that, we talk about RK Narayanan. In fact, Narayan's works are even more popular in many ways than the other two writers. Then he goes on to talk about how that one year when he had nothing to do, he had failed his entrance exam. What he did was he would spend long hours in the library. He would spend a lot of time reading. He started writing. He describes how he would select a lot of close friends. He would give them something to eat so that they will be in a good mood when he reads out his poetry. He describes very humorously how he would read the poem and he would wait for them to tell him that it is excellent. But there would be a pregnant silence, he says. There would be a stillness. Everybody is just looking at him. Then he'll ask them, shall I read it again? And they will say, no. We heard it very nicely the first time. It was wonderful. So, in a very, very subtle way, he writes with a good deal of humor. When we hear that, we know that his friends probably did not even understand, but they have to say these nice words. He goes on to describe how he passed the university exam the next year. He gets a BA degree from the Maharaja's College of Mysore, and then he thinks, maybe I will do an MA in literature and become a college professor. But as he walked up the stairs to hand in his application form in Maharaja's College, one of his friends met him and he tells him, if you do your MA, that is a sure way of losing your interest in literature. So he decides against an MA degree and he goes back home. He tries for several jobs, but he doesn't get any. So he goes to stay with his grandmother. At this time, he had started writing. And one day in September, on a day that was selected by his grandmother because she said it was very auspicious, he buys an exercise book, a notebook, and he writes the first line of his novel. Malgudi, with its little railway station, swam into view, all ready-made, with a character called Swaminathan running up and down the platform. This was the beginning of a magnificent career in writing. In 1930, he writes his first novel, Swami and Friends. This was rejected by a string of publishers. It just goes to show that we should not be disheartened by the first rejections that we face in life. He has been rejected by publishers and he goes to stay in his sister's house in Coimbatore. There, he meets and he falls in love with a young girl called Rajan. He has a number of obstacles to the marriage because there were astrological objections, financial obstacles, parental opposition. But Narayan manages to gain permission from the girl's parents and he marries her. He works for a short while as a journalist in a newspaper, and at this time he gets news from his friend in Oxford that a famous writer called Graham Greene has read Swami and Friends and he has recommended it to a publisher. So it was finally published in 1935. Graham Greene also advises Narayan that he should shorten his name. He said, Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Iyer Narayana Swamy is too long a name for an English-speaking public. This will not be convenient. So he tells him to shorten his name to RK Narayanan. The book Swami and Friends is semi-autobiographical because you find that Narayan speaks about a number of incidents from his own childhood. There were a lot of reviews in newspapers and journals, and all these reviewers wrote very favorably. They said the novel is good. The next novel was The Bachelor of Arts. Again, this is also autobiographical in the sense that it speaks about his experiences in college. It speaks about the experiences of a young man called Chandran when he was in college, how he sees a young girl by the river Sarayu, how he falls in love with her, how there is opposition from her parents, etc. So in that sense, it is autobiographical. The next novel is A Dark Room. The Dark Room was about domestic disharmony, meaning fights in the household, fights between a husband and a wife. This novel shows how the husband, the man oppresses the wife. The wife is a victim in the marriage. This is one of his most socially committed novels. All these three novels had to be published by different publishers because every publisher refused to publish it. Graham Greene kept on recommending it to another publisher. And Narayan says that he was unique in the fact that the first three of his novels were published by three different publishers. Now this time, Rajan, his wife, falls ill and she dies a little later of typhoid. Her death affected Narayan very, very deeply. He falls into a deep depression and he could not get over that depression for a long time. He never married throughout his life. He never remarried and he was a single parent to their daughter Hema, who was only 3 years old when her mother died. This bereavement, this loss of his wife brought about a significant change in his life, and it is based on his experiences in marriage that he writes the fourth novel, The English Teacher. This novel, The English Teacher, like his other two novels, is autobiographical. It speaks about a young college lecturer called Krishnan and how Krishnan gets married. He is married with a young daughter, how his wife falls ill and dies, the depression that Krishnan undergoes, his attempts to meet his wife on a psychic, a supernatural level, etc. He says, RK Narayanan says that this is the most autobiographical of all his novels. And here, in these three novels, you have what is called a thematic trilogy. A thematic, in theme, there is a trilogy, three novels of the same kind. That is, in Swami and Friends, you have the story of childhood. After that, you have the story of youth, of adolescence in The Bachelor of Arts. Then you have the story of married life in The English Teacher. After this, you find that Narayan stops writing autobiographical, bringing in autobiographical elements, and his stories have a more imaginative style. It is more imaginative, the next set of stories after The English Teacher. You have the next novel, Mr. Sampath. Mr. Sampath also draws on some of his experiences, like starting his own journal, but it is a movement. You find that he has broken away from dealing with his own life. After this, he publishes The Financial Expert. This is considered his masterpiece. It is hailed as one of the most original works of RK Narayanan. The inspiration for this novel, The Financial Expert, is about a financial genius called Margaya. The story of Margaya was narrated to him by his brother. We also have novels like Waiting for the Mahatma. The next novel is his most famous novel, The Guide. The Guide was written when he was in the United States. And you find that this novel was changed into a movie. It was remade as a movie, both in Hindi and in English. And this book won him the Sahitya Academy Award, the highest award for writing in India. Now, you also have a number of other novels that Narayan wrote. The Painter of Signs, The Man-Eater of Malgudi, The Talkative Man, A Tiger for Malgudi, etc. These are some of the novels that he has published. You also have a collection of short stories like Malgudi Days, which is the most famous of his collections. the collection of short stories like Old and New, Malgudi Landscapes. This Malgudi Landscapes is a collection of both extracts from novels and short stories. He writes again on mythology. He has translated the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. RK Narayanan also wrote a number of articles for newspapers and journals. All these were collected together, and you find that some of these essays were published in A Writer's Nightmare. You have stories and table talk in Salt and Sawdust. You have books like The Writerly Life, Banyan Tree and Other Stories, etc. Now, very importantly, apart from his career as a writer, in 1980, you find that his writerly life takes a new turn. He is nominated to the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the Indian Parliament. During these 6 years that he was in the Rajya Sabha, he focused mainly on one issue: the problems faced by school children. Few hours before he was put onto a ventilator, he spoke about planning to write his next novel about a grandfather. But he was never able to write that novel because he died on the 13th of May 2001 in Chennai, the city where he was born. He was 94 years old. Now, Narayan's stories are marked by simplicity, the simple style of writing, and their charm and gentle humor. You will find yourself smiling. Some of the works that you must definitely pick up are the first novel of his, Swami and Friends, The Bachelor of Arts, The Financial Expert, and The Guide. These will make very rewarding reading, and I hope that you will enjoy Narayan stories, which you will be introduced to by your teachers, and you will pick up a lot of Narayan's novels on your own. I wish you a very happy time reading RK Narayan. Thank you.